Hey, world history. Welcome to U8-L2, how to do ACAPS. My camera just does not want to seem to work today. So you'll just get my voice. If you don't know my voice already, some of you are like, oh my god, that's Miss Corey's voice. Like, seriously, she talks forever. Yeah, that's me. It's Miss Corey. If you don't know my voice and new to us, I am Miss Corey. I do a lot of the videos. You're going to hear me a lot. Congratulations. All right, let's talk about how to do ACAPS. So if you were with us last year or last semester, we did ACAPS pretty much every unit. And some of you are really good at it. Some of you need a little help. Okay. But before we get to that, just to note that if you are not seeing questions pop up on the Edpuzzle, like when I ask a question in blue text, make sure that your ad blocker is turned off, first of all. That would be the biggest thing. And make sure that when you do this Edpuzzle that you watch it all the way to the very, 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 very end, okay? Typically you have to submit it. So something like this, and then like a submit button pops up. Yeah. Cool. All right, so learning target today is primary versus secondary sources and how to do ACAPS. So questions in blue text, you're going to answer directly onto the Edpuzzle. So in this course, we will analyze a primary source documents. First question for you, just answer this on the Edpuzzle. What is the difference between a primary source and a secondary source? I know some of you saw this last semester, but it's always good to refresh. So what is the difference between primary and secondary sources? So a primary source would be documented by someone who witnessed or experienced an event. Okay, so my example for that would be like during Pearl Harbor in World War II. This soldier right here, he is witnessing the Japanese bombing of the Pearl Harbor shipyard. If he went and he told people about it, like the news or his friends or his family about it, he would be considered a primary source. He was there. He was witnessing the event himself. Okay? A secondary source is documented by someone who is interpreting the event. It did not see it for themselves. Okay? So an example of that would be like this boy listening to the radio and the news about Pearl Harbor. Okay? So the news people, okay, they probably didn't see Pearl Harbor firsthand, okay? He's getting this from a second-hand source, okay? That would be an example of a secondary source. All right, so primary versus secondary sources. All of them could be written, they could be on TV, they could be spoken, they could be videotaped, artists represented, diaries, letters, memoirs, journals, speeches, manuscripts, interviews. Those are all examples of primary and secondary sources. So an example of a primary source would be like the Declaration of Independence, okay? It was written by the founding fathers themselves. A secondary source would be something like the book Martin Luther King Jr., a biography by Roger Bruns, okay? Roger Bruns wrote this book, not Martin Luther King Jr., okay? So this would be considered a secondary source because Roger Bruns did not live the life of MLK Jr., okay? He's just simply writing about it. Here's another example. So, primary would be, I went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. A secondary source would be like if your friend said, hey, my friend went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. That'd be secondary because that person did not see Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel themselves. Okay? They just heard about it. So let's do a little quiz. Which of these 4 sources are primary sources? Would it be A, the autobiography of Malcolm X, B, interview with Minnesota U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar, C, National Geographic magazine about ancient Egypt, or D, Britney versus Spears, the documentary on Netflix? Yes, so half and half here. The autobiography of Malcolm X would be a primary source, right? Malcolm X wrote it about his life. He was the one living it. So that's a primary source. An interview with Minnesota U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar, that would be considered a primary source. The interview is about her, okay? They're asking her direct questions about what she's doing as a politician. That'd be a primary source. A magazine about ancient Egypt would be a secondary source. Clearly, the people who wrote about ancient Egypt in the magazine did not live in the time of ancient Egypt, okay? So that would be a second-hand experience. Now, this is a tricky one too. So with documentaries, they're tricky because they are considered a secondary source, but they might have primary sources embedded in it, okay? So overall, like documentaries are, right, they're made by like a production company. That's why they're considered a secondary source. But they might have interviews of people on there, like Britney Spears, her attorney, or family members. Those interviews embedded within the documentary would be considered a primary source. But overall, documentaries are considered secondary sources. All right, now we're going to talk about some grammatical symbols that you might find in historical texts. So, if you're ever reading a historical text and you see this really weird thing where it's a bracket with SIC in the middle, that means that the translator of the text is letting the reader know there's a grammar mistake in the original language and the translator is leaving it as an error. So, for example, if I was translating this sentence from, I don't know, French to English, and I saw that there was a grammatical mistake in the translation, I would put in the sick mark. So it says, the two of us are going out to dinner tonight at Maynard's, okay? I put in that sick there because that's the wrong two in the English language. But I'm leaving it there because that's what the original translation was all about. All right, another one would be footnotes. Okay, those are pretty common. So that's the author / translator wants to make a note about the subject being written. The note is usually then included at the bottom of the page. Sometimes it's in like the end of the chapter. It just depends, but typically it's on the bottom of the page. So here's the example here. If I was writing he, and then I have the little footnote number 1 right there, is the powerful god of all of Greece, and all other gods are below him. If it wasn't clear who he was, I would put in a footnote, and on the bottom of the page, I would write Zeus, the Greek god of the sky and the ruler of gods and humans. So whoever's reading this original sentence here knows who he is. There's also the ... or brackets with the ... This means that the original text is broken or missing, but historians don't know what words are missing. This is really common in ancient texts, which of course were passed for the semester. But an example would be Yarim has ordered 3 jugs of, and then you can see here, right, part of this cuneiform tablet is broken off. Payment in copper, and you can see another chunk's broken off, receive tomorrow. Okay? So it's literally broken away. Can't figure out what was written there. If you were reading a text that has brackets with a word inside of it, that means part of the original text is missing or deformed, but historians can actually figure out what word should be in the text. So for example, here's another cuneiform tablet. I know, a blast from the past was semester 1, right? But you can see that there is a big chunk missing from it, but historians can actually figure out what words are missing. So, for example, to the sleeping one who lay at rest, to him who would not arise from his sleep. So historians can figure out that this missing chunk here would be to him who. Yeah, pretty intense, right? So, how to analyze a historical document? There are many ways, and I encourage you to underline, take side notes on concepts you think are important or you're confused about. But in this class, we'll be using ACAPS. Again, a lot of you have used ACAPS before, but we're just going to do kind of a review of it. So here's my question. Have you used ACAPS before? So ACAPS stand for author, context, audience, purpose, and significance. So that's a nice little acronym there. So who created the source? Okay, that would be under the author. What do you know about this person or their point of view? and how might this affect the source's meaning, okay? So pretty much for under A in ACAPS, so again, that stands for author, you're just telling me who's the author. What do we know about this author? C stands for context. When and where was the source created? And how might this affect its meaning? So if there is a time period, if there is a location, be it a country, a continent, a city, anything, that would go under context. And then how might it affect its meaning? So if it was about, I don't know, eating soup in Minnesota versus eating soup in Louisiana, right? You might have two very different soups. So that might affect the meaning of what is being said in the source. A is for audience. So for what audience was the source created? How might this affect its meaning? So if you're kind of stuck on this one, I always think of this. Think of class, think of gender, think of race, think of age, think of religion. Think if this source was meant for the public, for everyone, or maybe it was for more of a smaller, specific group of people. For example, if you're reading like an old love letter, clearly that love letter probably wasn't meant for everyone and was probably meant for a specific person. P is for purpose. For what reason was the source created? So why is the author writing this? Is the author trying to persuade the reader about a topic? And how might this affect its meaning? So a good example of that would be during our China and Japan unit, right? We talked about, say, Shonagon. And she pretty much was just telling everybody that my life is hard because my unwanted guests won't go away and I hate babies crying and I get woken up from naps. That was pretty much the purpose of that diary entry that we read about her. And then S is for significance. What can be learned or inferred from the source? What is its main ideas and why is it important? So a good example of this would be like the Constitution, okay? Right? We learn from the Constitution how the U.S. should be set up, right? With the 3 branches and then the people in those 3 branches and all that good stuff. And why is it important? Well, it's important because that's what the United States' government is based upon. All right, let's do an example together. Example of ACAPS. Introduction. The Diary of a Young Girl, journaled by Anne Frank, and a Jewish teenager who chronicled her family's 2 years in 1942 to 44 in hiding during the German occupation of the Netherlands during World War II. The book was first published in 1947, 2 years after Anne's death in a concentration camp, and later became a classic of war literature. In 1940, the Netherlands was invaded by Germany. In July 1942, Margot, Anne's sister, received an order to report to the labor camp. Facing arrest if she did not comply, the family went into hiding on July 6, 1942, moving into a secret annex at Otto's business in Amsterdam, the entrance to which was soon hidden behind a movable bookcase. The Franks were later joined by 4 other Jews, Hermann and Auguste von Pels and their son Peter, and Fritz Pfeiffer, and were aided by several friends, including Mike Gies, who brought food and other supplies. This is by Amy Takanen. All right, so here's the introduction. I will always put some sort of introduction when we do an ACAPS document. So the introduction just gives background knowledge to what the primary source is, okay? So the primary source in this case would be one of Anne's diary entries. So this one is for August 21st, 1942. Now our secret annex has truly become secret because so many houses are being searched for hidden bicycles. Mario Kugler thought it would be better to have a bookcase built in front of the entrance to her hiding place. It swings out on its hinges and opens like a door. Mr. Voskugel did the carpentry work. Mr. Voskugel has been told that the 7 of us are in hiding, and he's been most helpful. Now, whenever we want to go downstairs, we have to duck and then jump. After the first 3 days, we were all walking around with bumps on our foreheads from banging our heads against the low doorway. Then Peter cushioned it by nailing towel stuffed with wood shavings to the door frame. Let's see if it helps. All right, let's start with A, author. Who created the source? Okay, that would be Anne Frank. Now, how do I know it's Anne Frank and not this Amy Buchanan? So Amy Buchanan was the one who wrote the introduction, okay? It's going to be the same thing with translators as well. They might do an introduction and put their name there. But we know this is written by Anne Frank because it says in the introduction, The Diary of a Young Girl, journal by Anne Frank. Bam, that's how we know. What do you know about the author or their point of view? Again, go back to the introduction and look. So we know that she's a Jewish teenager who chronicled her family's 2 years during German occupation, during World War II. We talked about how she was up there with her family. They went into hiding, into the secret annex, and they were joined by some other Jewish people as well. So let's write that down real quick. So what do you know about the author and their point of view? She is a Jewish teen in German-occupied Netherlands in World War II. Okay? She went into hiding with her family and 4 others, I think? Yeah. Right, 4 others, yes. So how might this affect the source's meaning? It shows that she only had interactions with those who lived in the attic with her and on very special occasions, someone who would help them. Like with building the bookcase with Mr. Voskuljil. Okay. All right, let's go into context. When and where was the source created? Again, look at the preface and the date. So we see here that it was from 1942 to 44 in German-occupied Netherlands in World War II. And we can even look specifically here at the diary entry date, right? August 21st, 1942. So we know it's in Netherlands, and it would be August 21st, 1942, right? Did I get that? Yep, good. All right, audience. For what audience was the source created? Okay, a lot of you like to say historians or students or someone who wants to learn about the past, but you got to think deeper. Those answers are way too vague. So who does the author want to read her book? All right. So first of all, right, so this was a diary. So first off, probably no one, because it's a private diary, right? Who wants or what teenage girl wants someone else to read her diary? Is it diary or dairy? Oh my gosh, I don't even know. But as time went on, she actually wanted people to read her diary. So later on, she wanted people outside of German occupation to understand what she and other Jews went through in hiding. Cool. All right. Oops, too fast. Purpose. For what reason was the source created? So, why is the author writing this? Is the author trying to persuade the reader about a topic? Okay. So this section that we wrote specifically, right, is just about the bookcase that was being built in the entrance, this guy helping them out. She wrote this section to show the reader the links they had to do in hiding, such as building a fake bookcase as a decoy. Okay? Significance. What can be learned or inferred from the source? All right. So we can learn just how serious people were in hiding Jewish people away from the Nazis, such as by building secret doors, okay, like the bookcase. And this is due to the cruelty of German Nazis, if they found Jews hiding. Okay. So what's the main idea? The main idea is to show that Anne and family had to hide themselves every day just to survive, but had allies to help them. Okay. Now there might be, going through this, you might have thought oh, what about this answer, this answer? There might be multiple answers. These answers that I put down here are by no means the only answers that you could have put down. Okay. So this is just an example of me going through it. If you have any questions, let us know. We're here to help. All right. So ACAPS, again, author, context, audience, purpose, significance. What questions do you have about ACAPS? And if you don't have any, that's okay. Just type none. We will be practicing ACAPS, not in Unit 9, actually. I had one, but I cut it out for this unit for this year. And not in Unit 10 either. Actually, the next one we'll do is in Unit 11, but it'll be here before you know it. So that's why we went through it today. So wrap up, today we learned about primary source, secondary source, what SIC means, footnotes, the ... dots, the brackets, and of course, ACAPS. Next up, you're going to do U8-L3, what is plagiarism? And of course, if you have questions, email your teachers or come to office hours, let us know. We're here to help you. All right, see you later. Thanks for